You have nothing left, old man. It's our turn now.
I won't be long, but you all should see the truth.
He shoved the mortgage statement across the dinner table like it was the check at a cheap diner. Didn't even look at me when he said it. You have nothing left, old man. It's our turn now. The silverware clinked. Chairs went still. Angela froze mid-sip, her wineglass trembling just enough to send a ripple through the red surface. The kids looked down fast, eyes on their plates, as if mashed potatoes could hide them. I smiled, slow and quiet, and picked up my napkin. Dabbed the corner of my mouth with the same care I'd used to feed those kids when they were toddlers. Then I slid the paper back toward him without a word. Before we continue, subscribe for more real stories of betrayal, sacrifice, and justice that hits harder than you'd ever expect. Like this video, and let me know in the comments if you've ever been made to feel like a stranger in your own family. My name's Frank Harwood. I'm 67 years old. Born and raised in Pittsburgh. You can still see the U.S. Steel Tower if you stand on my back porch in winter when the trees are bare. The tower catches the pale sun and glows like a dull knife. I worked 43 years in the same Ford plant, off Neville Island. Hands blackened, lungs full of dust and metal shavings. Laid bricks before that, laid foundations, literal and otherwise, for everything my son has. His name is Daniel. Danny, to me. Until that night. Now I don't call him anything at all. Dinner was at their new place, a big colonial out in Wexford, all white brick and black shuttered windows, the kind of house you see in glossy magazines stacked in dentist offices. There's a grand staircase that curls like a ribbon, a kitchen island the size of my old garage, recessed lighting everywhere, warm and flattering, as if even shadows were afraid to offend. They just finished remodeling, the third renovation in 6 years. Each one bigger, glossier, further from the house they could actually afford. Daniel insisted I come for Sunday dinner, said the kids missed me. He said it casually like he was doing me a favor, so I showed up, wore the same gray sweater Maria bought me the winter before she passed, carried a pie I'd baked that morning, still faintly warm in its tin, my hands shaking just enough to crack the crust. I should have known something was off when Angela met me at the door like I was a UPS package that needed signing for. No hug, no warmth, just a quick, polite, "Oh, hi, Frank. Coat goes there." Inside, the smell of roast beef hung heavy, mingled with garlic and some expensive candle that tried too hard to smell like pine. The house gleamed, polished hardwood, rugs thick as snow. I wiped my boots extra on the mat, even though the mat told me to live, laugh, love. Dinner was roast beef, too dry. Conversation was worse. Daniel talked about their summer plans, a lake house in Erie they were looking at. Nothing too crazy, just a place for the kids to get away. Angela talked about their new accountant and the strategy he had for optimizing deductions. I just listened, nodded, sipped my sweet tea. The glass was crystal, heavy in my hand, but the tea was watery. No one asked about me. No one asked if I'd been lonely since Maria. No one asked if I needed anything. Then came the statement. He slid it across the table like a final exam. It was printed in color. Glossy paper, heavier than it needed to be, folded with perfect edges. Wells Fargo letterhead, bolded numbers, a final balance. "Yo zeros," it read. Below that, my name, co-signer, co-owner. I knew that signature. It was mine. Except it wasn't. Someone had traced my life in pen and gotten the pressure wrong. Too heavy in the F, too light in the K. The paper had been edited, slightly, cleanly. Someone thought they were clever. He leaned back, arms crossed, proud and smug, like he'd just closed some giant deal. "Consider it symbolic, Dad. You're off the hook now. House is paid. Your job here is done." My jaw tightened, but I didn't speak. I learned a long time ago that silence can be louder than yelling, because I knew something he didn't. I'd already found the refinance letter in my mailbox last week, the one he didn't want me to see, the one with my forged signature on page 2, the one that said I'd been used again. Angela set her fork down gently like a teacher trying to calm a classroom. Frank, don't take this personally, but it's just time. We need space, independence. Her tone was sugar-coated, but the aftertaste was vinegar. I stared at my son, the man I'd given everything to. From his first car, a used red Honda I bought off a buddy for $2,500, to his first mortgage, $47,000 down, straight from my pension because the bank wouldn't give him enough, to the weekends I spent wiring his first fixer-upper when he couldn't afford an electrician. You have nothing left, he repeated, quieter now, almost rehearsed. Let us carry things from here. I smiled, because I knew that wasn't true. They thought I had nothing left. No strength, no pride, no cards to play. They were wrong. The rest of dinner blurred. I barely tasted the limp green beans. Dessert came, Angela's attempt at creme brulee that cracked like plaster instead of sugar glass. After dessert, I excused myself, told them I was tired, thanked Angela for the meal, though it felt like thanking a cashier, kissed my grandkids goodnight, soft heads, quick hugs. They smelled like shampoo and crayons and safety. None of this was their fault. Daniel didn't walk me to the door, didn't say goodbye, just picked up his wine glass and leaned back like a king who'd dismissed the court. The look in his eyes was new, not defiance, not anger, ownership, as if he'd won some invisible game I didn't know we were playing. I stepped into the cold. The February air bit at my cheeks. The driveway was long, lined with little solar lights Angela must have bought online. They blinked weakly in the night. I pulled my coat tighter and walked to my truck, boots crunching on the thin frost that had formed. My hands shook, but not from the cold. Inside, I didn't start the engine right away. The cab smelled like oil and old leather. Safe. Mine. I reached across the seat, opened the glove box, and pulled out the envelope I'd brought with me, just in case. Heavy with papers that had seen more truth than that whole fancy dinner. The refinance document. The one I intercepted after the mailman left it at my door because Angela never updated their forwarding address. The one with my signature forged in shaky, mismatched ink, like a kid tracing their parents' name on a permission slip. They didn't know I'd already gone to the bank. Didn't know I'd sat in that cold office chair across from the mortgage officer while she squinted at the document and said softly, "Mr. Harwood, this isn't your handwriting, is it?" Didn't know I had copies of every check, every transfer, every dollar I'd poured into their lives since 2006. Crisp, black and white proof that their empire had been built on my back. They didn't know about the clause buried in the original deed, the one I'd insisted on back when Danny begged me to co-sign, the clause that still gave me partial ownership. Quiet, legal, powerful. I looked up at the house, at the glowing windows warm with laughter I could almost hear through the glass, at the silhouettes of my grandchildren running down the hallway, at Daniel, standing now with his wine, back turned, smug as ever. And I smiled again, because they thought they'd shut the door. But I still had the keys. The next morning, the house was so quiet I could hear the furnace kick on from the basement. A low metallic cough, followed by the soft hum of heat crawling through the vents. It was still dark outside. A pale line of winter dawn pressed faintly against the kitchen blinds, but hadn't broken through yet. I sat at the kitchen table, same spot I always do, cup of black coffee steaming in the cool air, folder of documents spread out in front of me like a soldier's kit before a march. The envelope from the night before slid open clean across the top, as neat and surgical as a cut made by a steady hand. I'd taken my time with it, almost ceremonially. The refinance notice was real. The forged signature was mine. It wasn't even a good copy. I lifted the page to the window's first thin light. The ink looked wrong. The stroke weight was uneven, letters wobbling where my hand never would. They'd used the version from the original deed, the one I'd signed 17 years ago when I agreed to co-sign the house. A younger man's signature, back before arthritis, stiffened my fingers, back before I knew what desperation could make someone do. Back then, Danny had been desperate, laid off from his first real job, credit shot from medical bills and a couple bad car loans. Angela was pregnant with their second kid and terrified of losing their tiny starter home. "Dad, I just need your name on the loan," he'd said back then. I can still see his eyes, wide, embarrassed, but hopeful. "You won't have to do anything else." He was wrong. I did everything else. I made the first 3 mortgage payments when Danny's severance ran out and his unemployment check barely covered groceries. I paid for the furnace repair the winter Angela said the heat kept cutting out because the kids were coughing and I couldn't let them freeze. I covered the tax escrow when they forgot it wasn't included because I didn't want the county coming after them. Every time I thought I was helping them get back on their feet, they just leaned a little harder. I gave and gave and gave. Never asked for anything back. Not even thanks. Maria used to say I was too soft when it came to Danny. "He'll stand on his own if you let him." But she'd say it while handing me my wallet. We both loved him too much to watch him fail. But this forged refinance application was different. It wasn't just need. It wasn't just poor planning. It was fraud. It was theft wearing a family face. They'd tried to push me out of something I still legally owned. And the kicker? They'd backdated the signature, made it look like I'd agreed to it before the final payment cleared, so they could refinance under Angela's name alone, erase me, rebuild the mortgage, pull cash equity like siphoning gas from an old man's tank. $113,000 in equity, to be exact. I only knew that because the loan officer, a young guy named Kevin at the branch on McKnight Road, had quietly flagged it, said the numbers didn't line up, called me, voice low, like he was whispering something dangerous. "Mr. Harwood," he'd said, "I just wanted to confirm a few things. You're still listed as a co-owner and co-signer on this property. Did you authorize a refinance?" "No," I said flat. He paused. I could hear papers shuffling. That's what I thought. I asked for a copy. He sent it over within the hour. Everything. The new application, the forged signature, the equity pull estimate, the planned closing date circled neatly at the bottom. They were going to cash out their house, the one I'd helped them build brick by brick, the one my money protected when Danny couldn't, and they were going to take that cash, erase my name, and hand me a dinner napkin saying, "You have nothing left." I laughed when I saw the total, not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetic it curled in on itself, like a bad joke told by someone who doesn't understand comedy. I opened the second folder, the one I'd been building for years without really knowing why. An instinct, maybe. A quiet insurance policy, receipts, bank transfers, wire confirmations, old checks, some carbon copied, some scanned, Venmo screenshots from the early years when that was still new, even printed emails where Angela wrote things like, "You're a lifesaver, Frank. We'll pay you back soon." Every time they'd asked, I'd save the trail. "Dad, we're a little behind this month." "Frank, the property taxes hit harder than we thought. Could you just spot us this once?" Each one backed up with an amount. Each amount backed up with proof. $47,000 for the down payment. $189,600 in mortgage help over 14 years. $8,200 in emergency repairs. $3,100 in credit card debt, transfers. $2,000 for the SUV down payment when Angela's car died. $6,500 in school expenses for the grandkids that somehow became a Disney trip. Grand total, $256,400. I circled it in red marker. Sat back, let the number sink in. $250,000 that I'll never see again. But worse than that, I was expected to be grateful they were letting me walk away without more. I stared at the number until it stopped looking like money and started looking like years. Years of double shifts, skipped vacations, busted knuckles, and overtime hours, no one thanked me for. Something in my chest that had been sleeping for a long time finally woke up. I walked out to the garage, where the air smelled like oil and sawdust and the ghost of Maria's gardening tools. Pulled down the old lockbox she used to keep our house documents in. Dented, paint smeared from decades of moves. Inside, the original deed. Signed by me, Daniel, and Angela. My signature still valid. My portion still enforceable. I flipped to the clause I'd almost forgotten. A single line in dense legal print. All ownership adjustments require notarized consent of all current deed holders. They hadn't gotten that. They didn't think they needed it. They thought I'd be too slow, too tired, too old to do anything about it. They forgot who taught them how to read fine print. That day I drove down McKnight Road, past the shuttered diner where Maria and I used to eat pie at midnight, and pulled into the county recorder's office. A low beige building with flickering fluorescent lights and that permanent smell of paper and damp winter coats. The clerk behind the plexiglass barely looked up until I slid the form across. "I need an official certified copy of this deed," I said, voice steady. She typed, clacked, printed, stamped. The red seal hit the page with a satisfying thunk. I left with 3 copies. One for me, one for my lawyer, one for Daniel. Later that night, I sat back at my kitchen table, emailed Kevin, the loan officer, and CC'd the bank's fraud department. Attached the real deed, attached the forged refinance form, attached the pension withdrawal statements showing I'd been the one propping up that mortgage for years. The email was short, direct, unauthorized signature, active co-ownership, fraudulent refinance attempt. Please advise. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Gerald, old friend from the union days, straight shooter, still had grease under his nails even after 20 years of paperwork law. He answered on the second ring. "Frank, what happened?" His voice was half curiosity, half the calm before a legal storm. "I need a quiet title action filed, tomorrow." "Who's trying to steal what?" "My son." There was silence, a single heavy breath on the other end. Then Gerald said, low and firm, "I'm on it. No lecture, no pity. Just the kind of loyalty you don't find much anymore." I hung up and went to bed early. Didn't need TV, didn't need distraction. For the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt focused, like steel cooling into shape, like I'd finally remembered who the hell I was, a man who built, who fought, who read the fine print, and who still held the keys, even when his own blood tried to lock him out. 2 days later, the snow was still piled high along McKnight Road, gray at the edges where exhaust had kissed it, white where untouched. When I drove past the branch bank where Kevin worked, I didn't stop. I didn't need to. My part was done. The fraud department had my email. My lawyer had my deed. The ball was already rolling down the hill, steady and unstoppable. I spent that morning the way men like me prepare for war, not with shouting, but with paper. I sat at my kitchen table under the soft yellow light of the old fixture Maria had picked out decades ago. The wood grain was scarred with years of meals, bills, and quiet arguments. In front of me, the growing folder. I wasn't adding out of anger anymore, but precision, calm, measured. I printed screenshots from Angela's Facebook, carefully, date by date. Photos of their dream kitchen remodel, quartz counters gleaming like ice, Angela smiling with a wine glass raised, captions bragging about our success, our hard work paying off. I knew the real story. Those counters were bought with the money from my second pension withdrawal. I slid the photo into the folder. Another printout, Daniel standing in front of a new SUV, keys lifted like a trophy. The same week he'd asked me for help with school fees. The caption, "Finally upgrading. Hard work pays off." That hard work had apparently been mine. Each picture had a date. Each date matched a transfer from my bank. Every smile in those photos was bought with my hours, my sweat, my quiet sacrifices. The hypocrisy was perfect. It wasn't just a financial record anymore. It was a story told in receipts and pixels, a timeline of entitlement disguised as ambition. Around 10:30 a.m., my cell rang. Daniel's number. I let it buzz until voicemail, then Angela, then an unknown number. It buzzed, stopped, buzzed again, relentless, almost panicked. By noon, the landline was ringing. The shrill sound filled the empty house like an alarm. I reached over, unplugged it. The click was quiet but satisfying. I poured another coffee, black and sharp, sat back, looked at the folder. For the first time in years, the weight in my chest felt like something other than shame. It felt like momentum, like a train finally choosing its own track. I thought back, uninvited memories coming clear, painful but clarifying. The first time I'd bailed Daniel out, he'd been 23, laid off from the drywall crew after the company folded. Angela was pregnant with their first and scared to death. They'd sat at this very table, hands clasped, still kids in so many ways. Daniel had looked at me with the kind of eyes a son has when he still believes his father can fix anything. "Just a loan, Dad. I'll pay you back as soon as I'm steady." His voice had cracked a little. I'd believed him. He never did. By the time they bought the Wexford house, the pattern had hardened. Our arrangement wasn't a favor anymore. It was a pipeline, not a request. Not gratitude, just expectation. I'd ignored the little insults over the years because that's what fathers do, or at least what I thought they did. Angela calling my Ford your old truck in front of her friends. Laughter following like bells. Daniel correcting my pronunciation of prosciutto at a cookout, smirking like I was a child. The grandkids, once my shadows, dropping grandpa and starting to call me Frank, like I was the help or some distant acquaintance. Little cuts, never deep enough to make me leave, until Sunday dinner. "You have nothing left." Those words weren't just careless. They were a weapon. They hit like a steel beam, direct and cold. Something in me that had been bending for decades snapped clean. Now the humiliation wasn't theoretical. It had a paper trail, a forged signature, and a plan to erase me completely. I'd spent my life avoiding conflict, telling myself peace was better than pride. But the plant had taught me one unshakable truth. If a machine starts chewing up your hand, you don't beg it to stop. You hit the kill switch. That night, as the sun went down behind the skeletal winter trees, I drove with Gerald to the courthouse. The roads were slick but quiet. Streetlights hummed over empty parking lots. Inside, the courthouse smelled like wet wool and old paper. The floor tiles were scuffed from decades of boots and briefcases. We filed the quiet title petition in a fluorescent-lit office that didn't care about family drama. Just documents and signatures. It took 15 minutes. 15 minutes to stop a theft, years in the making. The clerk, gray sweater, reading glasses halfway down her nose, stamped it with a heavy thunk, handed me a case number. "They'll serve the other party within the week," she said, not looking up. Gerald glanced at me over his glasses, half a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "This is going to make Christmas awkward." I smiled back, slow. "Christmas is already ruined." He studied me for a moment, measuring something. "You're not trying to take their house, are you?" "I'm taking back my name," I said, "and my story." He nodded once. No lecture, no warning. Just respect. The kind men like us give when words aren't needed. When I got home, the house was cold but welcoming. I turned on the lamp by the door, hung up my coat, and walked straight to the kitchen table. I laid everything out like a general before a battle. Documents on the left, deeds, bank statements, proof of payments, screenshots in the center, Facebook smiles turned into evidence, certified copies on the right, red seals glowing under the light, my lawyer's card tucked neatly at the top, and in the middle, Maria's photo. Blue dress, steel in her eyes, even on paper. I touched the frame with one rough finger, spoke aloud softly. "You told me once, if they spit on your work, make sure they know whose sweat built it." Her smile didn't change, of course, but the room felt different, like she heard me. Or maybe I just finally heard myself. By Thursday, the first ripple hit. My phone buzzed. Daniel's text. Dad, we got something in the mail from the county. What is this? Call me. 5 minutes later, another. You can't do this. We're family. Angela's furious. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just shock that the old man might bite back. I didn't reply. Didn't owe him a thing. I spent that day cleaning my house. Not because it needed it, but because I needed the motion, the rhythm of reclaiming a space that had too long felt like a waiting room. I washed the kitchen floor until it squeaked under my boots, polished the old oak trim Maria had loved, running the rag along each groove, pulled down the box of Christmas decorations from the attic, the little artificial tree with one missing branch, the lights that still worked if you shook them first. For the first time in years, I didn't dread the holiday. It felt like mine again. That night, I sat at the table and flipped through the file one last time. I added a new cover sheet in bold black letters, proof of support. Then I made 12 packets, one for each dinner guest, each packet thick with receipts, photos, transfers, and the clause from the deed highlighted in yellow. I pictured their faces opening the envelopes. I pictured the silence falling over that table. I pictured Daniel realizing what he'd done, not just to his finances, but to his own name. It wasn't rage anymore. It was justice. Slow, deliberate, like snow piling up overnight until one morning you wake and the world is buried. I stacked the packets neatly, the red seals and highlighted lines catching the warm lamplight. Slid Maria's photo back to the center. Let myself breathe. I closed the EC folder, turned off the light, went to bed early. For the first time in a long time, I slept without that heavy knot of regret in my chest. The house creaked softly in the cold, but it didn't feel empty. It felt ready. Christmas Eve came dressed in silence, that eerie kind of stillness only snow can make. Thick, slow, muffled, like the whole world is holding its breath. Not a bird, not a breeze, just cold light pouring through the window and the quiet hum of my coffee maker breaking the dark. I got dressed with care. Pressed navy jacket, the one Maria always said made me look stately. Black scarf, leather gloves she'd bought me the year before she passed. Not for warmth, for memory, for armor. In the briefcase, 12 folders, each one identical, labeled with the date, the phrase, "For your awareness," and sealed with a gold paperclip. I placed them in perfect order, like cards in a rigged deck. I ran my hand once across the smooth tops, feeling the weight of every page, years of quiet sacrifice pressed flat and undeniable. I waited until 6:45 p.m. Angela's dinner always started at 7 sharp. Daniel liked to give a toast, glass in hand, always rehearsed, a little smug smile. I figured I'd arrive right between the champagne and the first forkful of prime rib. When I finally stepped outside, the air was biting and clean. Snow squeaked under my boots, the cold so deep it almost hummed. I parked down the street, tires crunching softly over packed drifts. A Lexus sat in the driveway. 2 Audis lined the curb, one still ticking warm. I smiled. The audience had arrived. The front door was cracked just enough for sound to escape. Holiday music spilled out, something classical and soulless, violins skating over canned cheer. Inside, golden lights blinked from a 12-foot artificial tree that probably cost more than my truck, or at least more than the tools I'd used to keep the roofs over their heads. I stepped into the foyer like I still belonged there. 12 heads turned. Angela froze mid-laugh, the smile sliding off her face like a mask dropped to the floor. Daniel straightened, his glass halfway raised. The toast never happened. I held up one hand, calm, civil, controlled. "I won't be long." Angela's voice shot up a little too fast, brittle around the edges. "Dad, we didn't know you were coming." "I know," I said, my tone steady even. "That's why I came." Daniel set down his glass with a soft clink. We're in the middle of something. I noticed. I stepped further in. Slow, uninvited, but unshakable. I brought gifts, I added, quiet enough to pull the room tighter. And then I began laying the folders down, one by one, around the table. Next to Angela's mother, who blinked in confusion. Next to Daniel's boss, a man with expensive cufflinks and a frozen half-smile. Next to the neighbor from across the cul-de-sac. 12 folders. 12 silent exchanges. The sound of paper sliding across linen was louder than any shout. "What is this?" someone muttered, flipping the cover. Another voice, low. "Mortgage records?" Someone else. "Wire transfers?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "Each of you knows Daniel and Angela," I said. My words were slow, deliberate, filling the room without force. You've heard stories about their home, their success, their independence. A pause, long enough to sting. "Here's mine." I nodded toward the folders. Inside, you'll find documentation of the financial support I've provided them since 2006. Down payments, monthly mortgage coverage, emergency repairs, tuition, taxes, vacations listed as school expenses, totaling over $250,000. Angela's voice trembled, sharp with panic and pride. "This is completely inappropriate. This is the truth." I turned and met Daniel's eyes. The boy I'd once rescued, now a man who tried to erase me. "And you tried to steal my name. You forged my signature on a refinance to pull equity out of this house behind my back." Gasps broke like brittle glass around the table. Forks clinked against plates, abandoned mid-bite. One woman slowly closed her folder, like it might catch fire if left open. Daniel's face had gone pale. All the easy confidence drained away. "Dad, please, let's talk outside." "No." My voice had weight now, finality. "Outside is where you tried to send me. I'm here now." Angela stepped forward, hands shaking just enough to betray her. "You don't know what you've done." "Oh, I do." I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the final copy, the county's stamp red and undeniable, held it high for the room to see. "This is a filed quiet title action. County clerk stamped it. Your refinance was blocked. Your equity withdrawal frozen. Your bank has the fraud report. Your lender has the emails. Your mortgage co-signer still legally owns a third of this house." I looked at Daniel, held his eyes as if to say, "You taught me to be quiet. You forgot I could still fight. And tomorrow they'll serve you. Merry Christmas." No one spoke. Not for a long moment. Even the tree lights seemed dimmer, their slow blink suddenly too loud. Somewhere near the end of the table, a man whispered, almost reverent, "Jesus." Daniel slumped into his chair as if his knees had given out. Angela backed against the china cabinet, the same one I'd helped them move into this house, hands now trembling like she'd touched something live. "Why would you do this to us?" she asked, voice small, breaking. "You did it to yourselves?" I said. I just stopped letting it happen. I buttoned my coat, slow, deliberate, the sound of the buttons crisp in the silent room, picked up my briefcase. "Enjoy your dinner." Then I turned toward the door. Right before I stepped outside, I paused, looked back once. "I forgive you both," I said, and felt the truth of it land heavy but clean. "But I won't ever forget what you tried to take." Then I left. The cold slapped me in the face like truth. Clean. Real. Earned. I got in my truck, started the engine, the low rumble a comfort I hadn't realized I missed, let it idle while I sat in silence, breath fogging the windshield. Through the rearview mirror, I saw the window. Angela had dropped into a chair, head in her hands. Daniel was standing now, hands buried in his hair, pacing like a man who just watched his castle tilt. Guests were exchanging long, uncomfortable looks, slipping folders quietly into purses and jackets. Some angry, some stunned, some just sad. The collapse had begun, and I hadn't raised my voice once. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it's just a man walking away while everyone else is still seated, holding the weight of their own choices at last. You'd think revenge feels loud, like a slammed door, a broken window, an explosion of anger. But that night, driving back through the snow-dusted streets of Wexford, it was the quiet that struck me most. Not silence exactly, just stillness. The kind of stillness you only get after something ends. Not a war, not a fight, but a long, slow surrender finally flipped back. The headlights carved pale tunnels through drifting flakes, cutting across empty driveways and sleeping houses trimmed in polite white lights. No music, no radio, just the hum of the tires on frozen asphalt and the faint rattle of the heater. And for the first time in years, I wasn't grinding my teeth. I'd done it. I'd taken everything they tried to erase me with. Lies, forgery, silence, and I'd turned it into fuel, not to destroy them, but to stop being destroyed. When I pulled into my driveway, the little house looked small against the dark sky, but it felt sturdy. Mine. I sat there a while, with the engine idling, hands loose on the wheel. No adrenaline left, just calm. A kind of peace I hadn't known since before Maria got sick. The next morning, Christmas Day, I made pancakes. Not for a crowd, just me. I grated in a little orange zest, the way Maria used to, bright citrus cutting through the warm batter. The smell rose and filled the kitchen, chasing away the cold. I set one plate, one fork, poured coffee into my favorite chipped mug, sat at the kitchen table while winter sunlight slid through the blinds and scattered gold on the scarred wood. The house felt full somehow, even though it was just me, maybe because I finally fit back inside it. Around 11:20, my phone buzzed against the table. Daniel. Again. The name lit up, stayed there, then faded when I didn't answer. Buzzed again, then a text. Dad, we need to talk, please. I messed up. I stared at the words a long time, not with anger, just with clarity. I typed, back. You did. Let the paperwork speak for now. I set the phone down, flipped another pancake, and went back to breakfast. Over the next week, things moved fast. Gerald forwarded me a formal apology from the mortgage lender, a clean corporate letter admitting the refinance attempt was void. The county clerk processed the quiet title, placing an official hold on any equity movement without my notarized consent. The fraud alert was logged in black and white, but the biggest shift didn't come in paper. It came in posture. 4 days after New Year's, I ran into Angela at the grocery store. She was alone, pushing a cart half filled with basics: milk, bread, cereal. No makeup, no bright coat, just tired eyes above a scarf pulled high around her neck. We locked eyes in the dairy aisle, 2 carts between us. She blinked once but didn't turn away. Frank, she said, voice low, thin around the edges. I'm sorry. I let the silence stretch. Not cruel, just honest. Necessary. I don't expect you to forgive us, she said after a beat. I just wanted you to know we get it now. I studied her face, the pride cracked, the veneer gone. Then I gave a slow nod. Understanding is the beginning, I said quietly, but trust isn't something you get back with words. Her eyes welled just enough to shine. She nodded, swallowed, and wheeled past me toward the eggs. I didn't stop her. I didn't follow. That was enough for one day. 2 days later, Daniel showed up at my house. It was dusk. The sky a dull steel gray. Porch light just flickering on. He didn't knock right away. Just stood outside for 10 long minutes, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, rocking on his heels like a boy caught sneaking home after curfew. When I finally opened the door, he looked older, smaller, like the weight of the past few weeks had pressed the arrogance out of him. Hi, Dad. I didn't invite him in, didn't shut the door either. I just stepped aside enough for him to choose. He stayed on the threshold. I didn't know how far I'd gone, he said. His breath hung in the cold air, little clouds with every word, until I saw the look in your eyes that night. I stayed quiet. The wind through the bare trees filled the space instead. I was greedy, proud. He stared at his boots. And I treated you like a burden instead of a blessing. That's on me. Still, I waited. I'm not here to fix it. I know I can't, he went on. His voice cracked, then steadied. I just want you to know I'm not going to fight the filing. I'll sign whatever you want. I nodded once. You'll sign what's fair. He met my eyes and nodded back. A small, sober acceptance. After a pause, softer. Do you think someday we'll, sit down again? For dinner? I asked, because we both knew that's what he meant. He gave a weak, hopeful smile. Yeah. I looked at him a long moment, searching for the son I used to know under the man he'd become, then said evenly, We'll see. And I closed the door gently, not a slam, not a punishment, just a quiet close to something long overdue. Later that week, I drove out to the cemetery. The roads were slick, but empty. Fields on either side covered in clean, untouched snow. Maria's headstone was half buried, a smooth white mound hiding her name. I brushed the snow off with my gloved hand until the letters showed, dark and clear. Laid a single red rose down, stem trembling in the cold. They tried to take the house, I said aloud, voice low but steady, but I remembered who it really belonged to. The air was so still I could almost hear her laugh if I tried. Soft, knowing. I stood there a while, letting the wind cut and wrap around me, letting the past settle in its proper place. And when I turned to leave, I didn't feel bitter, or triumphant, or hollow. I felt clean, light somehow. Now I take drives in the morning just to move, just to breathe. The roads are long and mostly empty, the steel mills and bridges shrinking behind me, fields opening up ahead. Sometimes the frost catches the sunrise just right, and the whole world turns to glass, fragile, shining, but strong enough to hold my reflection. I've still got my house, my name, my dignity, and the knowledge that I'm not invisible, not disposable, not easy to erase. As I drive, I remind myself, even when people forget your worth, the truth remembers. And sometimes, the quiet is the loudest victory of all. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.